There are many debates online how vintage lenses perform against modern lenses. And I decided to check for myself. I'm interested in it because I'm shooting film and I scan film negatives at home myself with the digital camera. So I need a sharp lens with good contrast and minimum distortion to scan negatives with high quality. So here are the contenders that I'll be using today to make the test shots. Among the modern lenses, I'm using Canon L series. It's RF mount, it's a very new models, 70 to 200 and 24 to 105 f4, both of them. Very new, so I'm curious how they perform in a situation where I need to shoot a close-up. They have a telephoto range, so I expect they will perform well in terms of distortions as well. And another new lens that I consider a modern lens is this prime lens by Rokinon. It's a fully manual lens. It's not as expensive as Canon L series, obviously, but it's pretty high quality lens. Among the vintage lenses, the main contender is this Nikon 105 macro lens, f2.8. I hope that this lens performs well because I've been using it already for scanning my negative, so I hope it shows very good results. And I throw another vintage lens in the mix. It's the Nikon 135mm f2.8 as well. This lens doesn't have macro capabilities, so I will probably have to use a macro ring. So by putting that ring between lens and camera, I'll be able to focus closer with this telephoto lens. I'll be making test shots using Canon R7 camera. It's a crop APS-C sensor, but it's pretty high quality. It's a 32 megapixel sensor with a good density of pixels. I previously was using Canon EOS R, which is a full frame and has approximately the same number of megapixels, 30 megapixels. So the density in this crop sensor on R7 is higher, so I'm curious if I will be able to notice any problems with my lenses using that demanding crop sensor. All of these lenses that I'll be trying today are full frame, so they're covering more than this R7 sensor. So I expect pretty good results here. I will be shooting this test chart in a close-up, so I'll be picking up only the middle of it, which will give me enough lines and symbols to be able to assess the sharpness, contrast, and distortion of each lens. I'll try to put these shapes in the corners so I can look at the corners of every image as well. I'll be shooting in a fully manual mode. ISO, shutter speed, and aperture will be set manually to avoid any surprises. I'll use 4 apertures on every lens to make the test shots. I'll start with probably f5.6 and up to f16 to see what aperture produces the best results for every lens. I'll show you the B-roll of my setup. I'll be putting the lens on a tripod with a horizontal bar, so the camera will be looking downwards on the table and the chart will be on the table. And in order to level my camera, I'll be using the mirror. If you're curious to know how to do it, let me know. I can record a short video explaining how it works. Basically, I'll make sure that there are no distortions caused by my setup. Okay, let's get to work. The test images are ready and I've already looked at the results, so let me show you what I have discovered. Let's start with Canon RF lens 24 to 105. I shot it at 65 millimeters. Let's look at the middle of the images, and Here we can see the aperture is f5.6. The center of the image is sharp, f5.6 is slightly softer, and f16 is losing contrast due to diffraction probably. But it's not that noticeable in the center of the image. Let's look in the corner. In the corner at 5.6 we can see some ghosting, some little bit lack of sharpness here. It gets a bit, it gets noticeably better at f8. And I think the best result is at f11. And f16 in the corners I also can see that the contrast is getting worse. So next let's go to another Canon lens, 70 to 200 millimeters, also RF f4. I shot at 100 millimeters. So looking at the center as well, 5.6 is slightly softer but barely noticeable, and f16 losing a little bit of contrast, but in the middle of the image is not that noticeable. Let's look at the corner. So at f5.6 the corner is slightly softer, and you can see it gets a little bit sharper on f8. I'm not sure if you can see it on YouTube, but I'll put the link to the high resolution files in the description. f8 and f11 both nice sharp corners, and f16 is not too bad. Maybe a slight loss of contrast, but barely noticeable. Next, let's look at Rokinon 85 millimeters, and looking in the middle, the f16 is the bigger difference. It's clearly losing contrast comparing to f11 and f8. Let's look in the corners. 5.6 is quite soft in the corner. f8 also is kind of soft. At f11 it gets sharper, and at f16, due to loss of contrast, it's going to be worse than f11. So f11 is the best aperture for this lens. 5.6 and even f8, the corners are a bit too soft comparing to Canon lenses. Next, let's look at the Nikon 135 millimeters. That's an old AI lens. Okay, we're looking at the center of the image. It looks good, apart from f16, obviously it's getting a bit softer, and probably due to diffraction and loss of contrast. Let's check out the corner. At 5.6 it looks great, even better at f8, f11 comparable, and f16, because of loss of contrast, it doesn't look that great. So 5.6 quite soft corner, but f8, f11 very good. I don't see much difference between Canon lenses and this old Nikon lens. And looking at the last one, Nikon macro lens, 105 millimeters. Looking in the center of the image, it's all good. f/16 is also suffering from loss of contrast. Let's check out the corner. 5.6 doesn't look bad. But f/8 maybe a little bit better. And f/11 quite similar to f/8. And f/16 same because of diffraction. It's a little bit worse. So probably f/8, f/11 are the best. I'd probably choose f/8. Now let's compare the best shots for each lens. I've chosen f/8 for both Nikon vintage lenses and f/11 for the modern lenses. So just looking at the images overall, there's one that stands out a little bit, and it's Nikon 135 millimeters. I feel like it has slightly less contrast overall, even though it's shot approximately the same as all the other images. So let's check out the center of the images. So Rokinon looks to me a bit softer than everything else. Let's check out the corners. So 24 to 105 millimeters Canon looks a little bit softer in the corner than the second Canon lens, 70 to 200. And both Nikon lenses actually look sharper in the corner. It's just 135 Nikon suffers from a little bit of contrast loss, but I like the corners on Nikon lenses a bit better. But it's comparable with Canon 70 to 200. Rokinon is quite soft in the corners. It's probably worse performing lens here. And the last thing, let's check out the distortion. And using the grid, I cannot see any noticeable distortions, which is good, but in a way it's expected because I'm using a crop sensor on a full frame lenses. So I'm using just the center part of the image. I did not expect to see a lot of distortion. Yeah, it looks good on all lenses. Overall, in this test, Rokinon performed the worst, and Nikon 135 also has some flaws. Seems like the contrast is a bit lower, but not significantly. And among the modern Canon lenses, 70 to 200 seems to be performing better than 24 to 105. And the Nikon 105 macro lens is actually performed at the same level, if not better than modern Canon RF lenses. So in my specific test, in a close-up shot with a crop sensor, vintage Nikon micro 105 millimeters f2.8 performed great at the same level as Canon L lenses. I'm quite pleased with the result. I've been using this micro lens for a while and will continue using it with this new crop sensor. It's nice that I don't need to get a new modern lens for scanning my film. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed that video, please subscribe. It will help me to prioritize this channel and create more content for you. See you next time.